Well, what's up, Journey? We're so excited to be with you all this weekend, but even more excited for us to open the doors of our physical locations in just 2 weeks. It's been way too long without seeing all of you, and we know we're going to keep gatherings online as well, but if you're ready like I am to be in either of our Newark or West Wilmington locations, drop a comment in the chat and let us know. I was just talking to Pastor Mark a few days ago, and Journey, he cannot wait to be back either. There's nothing like being able to gather together in person. Over the last few weeks, we've been in a series called Enough is Enough, talking about insecurity. Now, fellas, I know, I get it. It's not the most manly thing to talk about. So how about for this weekend we talk about sports? Well, no, those don't really exist anymore. Thankfully, baseball and hockey are on their way back, and we won't be forced to watch cornhole on ESPN anymore. But we could talk about movies, except none of us have been to the theater in the last 4 months. Man, 2020 really has been rough. Not only has there been a global pandemic, but then there were murder hornets, toilet paper flying off the shelves like it's a Black Friday deal, and worst of all, middle-aged adults trying to learn TikTok dances from their teenagers. We can all say that this year is nothing like what we expected. I mean, I remember it being January and saying that this would be a great year. I had so much to look forward to and be excited about. I had trips planned out and goals set for my finances and things I wanted to do with my life. And now, we're stuck. We're stuck in our homes more than we want. We're stuck behind a mask to go to the grocery store. We're stuck at a job because the economy's fragile. We're just stuck not knowing what's going to happen next. And being stuck leads us to get frustrated or discouraged or maybe even a little insecure. And sometimes we feel like the world is just crashing around us, and we feel like we have to hang on for dear life. That's us trying to find security. I mean, we've all done it. Maybe for you, it's been clinging tight to your family or hoping that your job would satisfy you or looking to a relationship to be the thing that finally makes you happy. It's almost like we're a turtle, and the second that something rocks our world, we retreat into our shells and close ourselves off to the world around us. Not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually too. But that's not what we were meant to live for. In fact, Jesus said that he came to make our lives better, not worse. So how do we step into that kind of life? The life that's intended for us. How do we reopen our lives to what God has for us next, regardless of where we are now? Well, there's a group of people in the Bible that wondered that same question. They were God's chosen people, meaning that he loved them and they loved him. They're called the Israelites, and in the Bible, we find that the Israelites were led out of slavery toward a land that God promised just for them. In fact, God says this, "But I have promised you, you will possess their land because I will give it to you as your possession, a land flowing with milk and honey. I am the Lord your God who has set you apart from all other people." Not only is this a life that God has given them, he's promising that it's going to be good. I mean, the land is full of milk and honey, or in 21st century terms, filet mignon and lobster tail. Or I guess if you're a vegan, it's a land flowing with kale and beets. I get it. Today, there's 4 things that I want you to remember from the message. Here's number 1. God's plan for you is good. When God looks at your life, he has good things in store for you. In fact, he's promising it to you. Does that mean that everything in your life is always going to be filet and lobster? No. Sometimes it's going to feel like a McDonald's cheeseburger that's been left over from the night before. But the plan that God has for you is good. Sometimes we're just the ones that get in the way. Sometimes we get our eyes off of the good things and we get our eyes off of God. We start getting insecure because we don't get the answers we want when we want them, or we try to control the outcome of every situation, and we complain when it doesn't go our way. We might close ourselves off from the plan that God has for us. Maybe even for some of you, that's the reason why you haven't gotten serious about a relationship with God, because it seems like he just hasn't come through for you. This happens to the Israelites. They get their eyes off of God's plan for their lives and the land that he's promised them, and instead, they try to do life on their own. And here's what happens to them next. The Israelites had traveled in the wilderness for 40 years until all the men who were old enough to fight in the battle when they left Egypt had died. For they had disobeyed the Lord, and the Lord vowed he would not let them enter the land he had sworn to give us, a land flowing with milk and honey. 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. Let me ask you, does this season of your life feel like you're wandering in the wilderness? Maybe it hasn't been 40 years. Maybe for you, it's just been 40 days. 40 days of scrolling through social media and not sure how to react. 40 days of wondering if the call from your boss would be to come back for work or pack up your cubicle. 40 days of isolating yourself from everyone else so you don't have to talk about what's really going on in your emotions. And those 40 days, well, they've just left you feeling unemployed or unsettled or unmotivated to go towards the good plan that God has for you because you just can't see it anymore. Here's the second thing we got to know today. God's plan for you requires endurance. Honestly, the last 4 months for me were tough. There were days I never wanted to get out of bed because I didn't know what the point was. I felt like I didn't have what it took to be the leader or pastor I wanted to be, or husband or friend people needed me to be. I mean, why was I working so hard and just not getting the results that I wanted? And I started to think that my life would just always be this way. I needed endurance because God's plan requires it. You can't decide you want to run a marathon in a day. You have to train for it and build your endurance. And too often we get frustrated and discouraged that we're not at the finish line when in reality we've really only been training for 2 days and have already decided to quit. God's plan for you is good. The finish line is good. The end result you want is good. God designed it just for you. So don't quit. Don't stop running. Don't stop fighting through the pain. Don't stop battling that insecurity. Put one foot in front of the other and run with endurance. You see, for the Israelites, God brings them out of that difficult season and they press forward. They come to the Jordan River, which is right on the border of the new land that God has given them. And here's what happens next. So the people left their camp to cross the Jordan, and the priests who were carrying the Ark of the Covenant, basically just a symbol of God with them, went ahead of them. It was the harvest season, and the Jordan was overflowing its banks. You see, the Jordan River wasn't your average slow-moving river. Like, this was a serious body of water. But as soon as the feet of the priests who were carrying the ark touched the water at the river's edge, the water above that point began backing up a great distance away at a town called Adam, which is near Zarethan. And the water below that point flowed to the Dead Sea until the riverbed was dry. Then all the people crossed over near the town of Jericho. Crazy thing happens, right? A couple of guys dip their toes in the water, and then God causes the water to stop upriver like a dam, and dry land appears for the Israelites to walk to the other side. God comes through, like he just does the impossible. One of the things that I'm going to miss most this summer is a good fireworks show for the 4th of July. Can anyone else relate? I mean, I know I'm going to miss it. Growing up, my family would always help put on a huge fireworks show near Penn State University. And fun fact, at one point, I was an 18-year-old legally allowed to blow stuff up. That's right, guys. Be jealous. I remember we would roll in for our first day of work, and it would be 4,000 degrees outside and 200% humidity as we unloaded this tractor trailer full of supplies. It always just seemed like an impossible task getting to the end of the trailer. I remember finally finishing and trying to find the smallest piece of shade in a slight breeze, only to realize that we had a whole other trailer to unload after that. And I'm sure that's how the Israelites felt after crossing the Jordan River. Exhausted from hauling their stuff all day in the hot sun. Yeah, they were one step closer to the land God had promised them and had just seen something impossible happen, but just getting today's work done must have felt exhausting. Have you felt that way over the last couple of weeks? Maybe you've seen something impossible happen, a bill get paid with money you weren't expecting, or forgiveness come in a relationship when you just didn't think it would. But you get to the end of the day and you're still so far off from where you want to be, and it's tempting to just close back off to the world around you. You see, God knew that his people would feel this way. So here's what he tells Joshua, the leader of the Israelites. He says, when all the people had crossed the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, now choose 12 men, one from each tribe, and tell them, take 12 stones from the very place where the priests are standing in the middle of the Jordan, and carry them out, pile them up at a place where you will camp tonight. We will use these stones to build a memorial. In the future, your children are going to ask you, what do these stones mean? And then you can tell them, they remind us that the Jordan River stopped flowing when the Ark of the Lord's covenant went across. These stones will stand as a memorial among the people of Israel forever. The Israelites had been here before, remember? They saw God's plan for them, and it was good. Remember, it was a land full of filet and lobster. But then they got their eyes off of God's plan and tried to control life on their own and ended up wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. Finally, God shows off again and helps them cross the river, only this time, they're determined to not forget it. They're going to remember what God did for them. Let me ask you that question. What's God done for you recently? Has he given you the patience in a fight with your wife? Has he showed up unexpectedly, providing encouragement to your thoughts? Has he maybe been in the voice of a friend giving you advice? Maybe you're thinking, God hasn't done anything for me. Like, look where I'm at. I mean, we're halfway through 2020. My relationships are rocky at best. My 401k took a dive. Graduation and prom were canceled. Heck, the freshman 15 turned into a Corona 50. I mean, at this point, I just want the year to be over and act like it never happened. Well, whether we can see what God has done for us recently or not, it brings us to the third thing that we need to know this weekend, that what you go through determines where you go to. What you have gone through, your past decisions and actions and circumstances, all determine where you end up. So like the Israelites, pause and reflect. Take stock of what the last 4 months have been like. Build a way to remember this season for yourself. If your life is better now than it was before March, great. What made it that way? If your life is worse now than it was in March, what decisions did you make along the way, or habits have you formed that have made it that way? In fact, I just read a quote the other day that said, your current habits are perfectly designed to give you your current results. What you've been doing over the last couple of months, it's gotten you to this point. So did you spend more time binge watching Netflix alone, or making time for friends even if it was on a Zoom call? Did you focus on the things you can control, or just stew over the headlines hoping someone else would make a difference? Don't be surprised by where you ended up. You took the path to get here. I did. We all did. We're all in this together, but good news, the same can be said for the path out. If we choose to change our habits now, our future changes with it. What you go through determines where you go to. So where do you want your life to go? Do you want your life to be better in the future? Want to get unstuck and thriving? Well, we need to reopen our lives to the plan that God has for us all along. Put some habits in your life that'll help you get there. Start with gathering consistently. Tune in online, even when focusing is more difficult. Come to a physical location if you can so that you can connect face to face with other people in our community of faith. Get in a J group because they kick off this weekend. Go get coffee with someone, even if you have to wear a mask, and ask them about their life. Open your life up to connection that your soul has been starved from for months. If I'm learning anything about myself, it's that those connections I've had over Zoom or social media, they're not as real as I thought they were. I need real people to connect with. God's plan for us is good. God's plan requires endurance, and what we go through determines where we go to. When I was 16 years old, I went away on a weekend trip with my church youth group. It was during one of the sessions that I remember slipping away to the side of the hill by myself and just sensed God say to me, Brad, you're going to be a pastor. Now, I get it. That sounds weird. I had no idea what that looked like or even what my next step was. And no one, trust me, no one in my high school would have ever guessed that I'd be doing what I'm doing right now. But I couldn't shake that feeling. Fast forward to college, I was part of a campus ministry just for college students. I was regularly leading a J group for freshmen, trying to explore what that next step towards God's plan for my life might be. I remember growing in my faith and meeting a ton of people, including my wife, Haley, and life was great. God's plan for me was good, and I could see it. Well, then one afternoon, I get pulled into the campus director's office for one of the hardest conversations I've ever been in. Long story short, they removed me from my leadership role. The director and I just were not seeing eye to eye, and I was a punk 20-year-old with an attitude who really didn't care what he thought, and I was doing my own thing instead of honoring his authority in my life. I thought I could make my own decisions and lead people without following somebody else. I thought I could just do it all on my own. And I'll be honest, it was one of the hardest days of my life. All of a sudden, I had thoughts racing through my head that I had never had before. I heard, Brad, you're not even good enough to volunteer to lead a group. How do you expect to be a pastor someday? You should just quit. It was insecurity rearing its ugly head telling me I wasn't good enough or spiritual enough or smart enough or nice enough, that I wasn't enough, and I started to shut down. Maybe you're feeling that way right now. Like you're in the boxing ring with insecurity and it just feels like insecurity is winning. You tried to trust God with the good plan he has for your life, but you can't see it anymore. You've tried to run with endurance, but if you're honest, you're just out of strength. Someone posted something that made you question everything, or COVID threw a mean right hook, or you got knocked down and all you want to do is sit on the mat and take a break. I'm standing here today, Journey, having gone through that season, having gone toe-to-toe with insecurity, and I had to remind myself what God said to me when I was 16. Brad, you're going to be a pastor. Not you could be if you don't screw it up. So come on, you gotta get up, straighten up your gloves, go to your corner with your trainer and spend some time with God and get the pep talk that you need. Join that J group this summer and remember why you got into the fight in the first place, because there is victory ahead, but only if you get up. And that's what the Israelites did. They got up. Remember we left the story with them taking stones from the Jordan River and building a memorial of what God had done? Well, they keep moving forward, and the first town on the other side of the Jordan River was the city called Jericho. It had high walls and soldiers guarding the entire city, and everyone in the area was afraid of them. Victory just seemed impossible. But the Israelites were promised that land by God. They endured a lot to this point, and they'd seen the impossible made possible, so they weren't insecure. God told them he'd have victory over Jericho if they would just simply walk around the city once a day for 6 days, and then on the seventh day, walk around it 7 times. And on the final lap of the city, the Israelites made a ton of noise, and watch what happens. When the people heard the sound of the ram's horns, they shouted as loud as they could. Suddenly, the walls of Jericho collapsed, and the Israelites charged right into town and captured it. Here's the fourth thing you need to remember today. You will be victorious. Do you want your life to be more than it is right now? Do you want to get unstuck and back on track with what God planned for your life? Then let's go. I know it feels impossible right now. I know it feels like a Jericho because the walls are high and the enemy is fierce. But guess what? If 4,000 years ago, God could help the Israelites cross the Jordan River on dry land and knock down the walls of Jericho with a shout, I know he is capable of bringing you through whatever you are facing right now. So what would it look like for you to speak victory over your problems? Speak victory over your fear. Speak victory over your circumstances. Nothing can stop you when God is on your side. When we listen to the voice of God more than the voice of our insecurity, we will be victorious. God's plan is good. God's plan requires endurance. What you go through determines where you go to, and you will be victorious. If you needed this message today as an encouragement, then I want you to pause for a minute and let's pray that God would lock it deep in our hearts. Come on. God, we love you. We're so thankful for what you're doing in our lives. God, I'm so thankful for what you're pouring into us and reminding us that you have a good plan for our lives. God, help us not get our eyes off of that plan. Remind us that it's good and it's what you want that's best for us. God, I pray that you would give us endurance, that when life gets crazy and starts to throw different things at us that we don't feel like we can handle on our own, God, I pray that you would give us endurance to battle through those, battle through the fear and the worry and the insecurity and the doubt, God, and let us just have the confidence that you want us to have. God, help us remember that what we've gone through is determining where we're headed next. That you would help us put some habits in our lives right now that will set us up for success in the future towards that plan that you have for us, God, and remind us here today that we are victorious. We're victorious, God, and we remind ourselves of that right now. We get our eyes off of the insecurity and the ways that we've messed up and fallen short and missed the mark, God. And we remind ourselves that we are victorious because of what you are doing in our lives. In your name we pray. Amen. Now, maybe some of you are here today and the story of the Israelites actually really resonates with you. You've been thinking about it over the last couple of minutes, but the part that really resonates with you is the part where they say that they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, and that's the season that you feel like you're in right now. You're just kind of wandering, hoping that something will pan out or hoping that your life will get better. And I know I've been in seasons like that, but the thing that has pulled me through every single one of those seasons is my relationship with God. And it's all started because I've decided that I'm not going to walk through the wilderness alone. I'm going to trust the plan that God has for me. I'm going to try to have endurance. I'm going to realize that where I've been gets me to where I am next. And I've found that I'm victorious because of what God's done in my life. Because God sent his son Jesus to die for us, then we've got access to him. We can have a relationship with him and live in that kind of a relationship. And maybe you're sitting wherever you are right now and you're thinking, that's what I want. I want that kind of a relationship with God. And if that's you, wherever you are, will you join me? Will you open your heart up to God? Because this is your moment. Well, your wilderness can forever change. So come on, everybody that's watching right now, just open your heart up to God. And if that's you, if you're ready to put your faith in Jesus, I just want you to pray something that can be my words or you can use your own. God hears them both. Just pray something like this. Just say, God, I need you. I need a relationship with you. I'm tired of doing life on my own, and I'm choosing to do life with you. I believe that your son died and rose again to make me right with you. Help me live a brand new life in the victory that you have planned for me.